Hey guys, gonna ever do another one of these trucking question and answer type videos, similar to what I just did not too long ago. I know I have several more questions from Mohammed that he wanted to ask. He wanted answers to. It's actually more good questions, of course. And also, there was at least one comment in a previous video that I've done recently that someone asked as well that I'm going to be addressing on that. Go into detail on that one. Okay, so I already tried doing the recording of this previously, but I found it to be excessively long and maybe a little bit long-winded with anecdotes and stuff that didn't necessarily have enough to do with the questions. So I'm going to try to redo this and make it a little bit more terse for you guys, at least somewhat more. But I want to at least get to the point of the questions and then give a little bit of detail on there. So it's probably going to be a little bit longer than some of you guys might want to deal with. I will try to put timestamps in the video description for you guys. So if there's a particular question you want to skip, no problem. Just go to the video description and just go to the next timestamp for a question that is more of interest to you or something. Hopefully that'll help you guys out too. It'll get to the meat and potatoes of whatever might be covered in this video that will interest you, or let you to know pretty quickly if you want to just skip the whole video. Alright, so now keep in mind this is oriented around those who are new to the industry or who are outsiders and just want insight into how things are done here. So that's what I'm going to cover. So experienced drivers, hey, you're welcome to add your inputs in the comment section if you have something else that you think might be useful to add in there, maybe even some of your own stories or something. But yeah, by and large, I'm just mainly gonna orient this for the newcomers to the industry, right, or outsiders. Okay, so without further ado, let's let's start with the emailed questions from Mohammed, and then after that we'll get to the comment. All right, so the first question that Mohammed asked on this one here was, do all shippers have a scale to weigh your loaded truck and trailer? Okay, so the answer on that one, plain and simple, is no. Some do, some don't. And even with the same customer, like the same company involved, like let's just say Tyson Foods, which I do a lot of. Some Tyson plants actually do have scales and some of them don't. So a good example, the Tyson plant in Waterloo, Iowa. They do have a scale, although I can't say I've ever personally used it because I always use the one at Flying J right down like a couple miles away. I have to go right past the Flying J to even get onto the highway when I'm on my way out of there. So I just use the Flying J one, and then the Tyson plant there, they don't require me to use it. Theirs. Okay, also the Tyson plant in Olathe, Kansas, which we do a lot of pickups from, they do have a scale. In fact, they will not even let you leave unless you get on that scale and verify that your weights are good first. So there is that. Tyson plant in Carthage, Texas. That's another one we sometimes do pickups from. Actually, I think they do have one. Yeah. Theirs is over on the west end of the lot, or the back end of the lot. Some people don't even know it's there, but
attention, a new important message has arrived.
Yeah, they actually do have one. Same with the Tyson plant in Center, Texas. They have one too, but I'm sure other Tyson plants I could think of that might not. Actually, Tyson, more often than not, they do have one. Like the Tyson facility in Lexington, Nebraska. I just picked up a load from there not too many weeks back. That also has a scale. Now JBS plants, they're hit and miss. They think they tend to not have them, but yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of any JBS plants that I go to that do have them. That doesn't mean they don't exist though. And same with like Walmart. Okay, when I pick up in Colton, they have an on-site scale, so I always pick up. Yeah, I'm always skilling out there. Produce shippers, it can be anywhere, like in California and Washington particularly. Maybe there are shippers in Idaho too. I guess you could call potatoes produce, but now, I don't really do much for potato loads. We don't really, JCT doesn't really do pickups and deliveries in Idaho. They go through there, but I mean, not saying they don't ever do pickups or deliveries there, but I don't really know much for pickups. Maybe a scant few deliveries there, but ton of produce shipments, pickups in California and to some extent Washington as well. Less in Washington now, but those shippers kind of hit and miss. A lot of them don't have skills, but others do. So I hope that answered that question there. I don't want to go into too much great detail on that, but generally speaking, yeah, some shippers will have skills that you can use and some don't. Also, while we're on this subject, if they do have a skill, it's a good idea to not trust the skill for sure until you know that. Let's say if I pick up a load from, let's say perhaps I have my next load that I pick up after my current one, which right now I'm on my way to Terrell, Texas. I am in West Monroe, Louisiana at the moment. I ran out of hours on my 70-hour clock, and a later question is going to address that topic there, by the way. Which is what are recaps, but we'll get to that one later. Let's just say I make my delivery with this load in Terrell, and my next load picks up at the Sanderson Farms plant in Bryan, Texas. We seem to be doing a lot of those right now. That plant does have a scale. You actually have to do empty and loaded weight there before you leave. Now, if I use their scale, because I can get all of the axle and gross weights from their scale, I'll have a really good idea what my weights should be, but until I actually get on an actual CAT scale or go across a state scale, it's best to not trust what that scale's readings say until you know for sure that it's accurate, or reasonably accurate. Now, mind you, scales it doesn't matter if it's a state scale or customer owned or CAT scale, whatever, they're going to have an error calibration tolerance. So expect that you might have a good up to a couple 100-pound difference on your weights there, even if you haven't burnt any fuel. So keep that in mind. I have gone through shipper scales that were way off. In fact, I had one when I was with Sierra England that picked up in, I think, Twin Falls, Idaho. My weights when I got on their scale were like way off from what I was expecting. I think I was overweight on the steers, or I can't remember what it was, but I ended up having to move my fifth wheel to get all my weights where I wanted them according to the shipper's scale. But I was like, this can't be right. This just doesn't seem right. It's I know what my steer axles usually weigh when I have my fifth wheel where it's at. I don't usually ever have problems with my steers being overweight or lower or whatever. I think I was over 12,000 and I wanted them, which I could have been legal at, but I ended up I usually want them in the mid 11,000 range or so. But I just knew there was something off. So as my co-driver, I was a co-driver. I wasn't a trainer yet. I remember we were driving eastbound on 84. We ended up stopping at the weigh station there on 84, I-84, just east of 86. It was closed for the night, but he was out of hours. We were going to switch seats there. So, and when he did that, he went through there. He went ahead and went across the state scale, because there was an indicator there that could tell us what our weights were. And yeah, I confirmed that the weights were pretty far off. I think the gross weight, I don't recall if it was far off at all, but the axle weights were all discombobulated, whatever, from what they really were. So I ended up stopping at the Pilot in Ogden, Utah, on my shift, and then double checked what the CAT scale reading, what it was, and then ended up moving my tandems and fifth wheel back to something more appropriate for that load. And went back across the scale, double checked, and everything was good. And yeah, so that confirmed that that shipper's scale was not to be trusted. But other shippers like the Walmart DC in Colton that you guys see me picking up from all the time, theirs is accurate. I don't have any problems with theirs. There are some others too that are pretty accurate too. But point is, it's best to go across the shipper's scale and then go verify on a CAT scale, then catalog it for that way. If you know that next time you go to that same shipper, there's a better chance their scale is going to be accurate. Doesn't necessarily mean it will be, but because they can go out of tolerance, but there's a better chance that they're going to be okay, more trustworthy. So I hope that's a little bit detailed there, I'm sure, but hope that, yeah, I think that did a really good job of answering that one there. Okay, next question. What to do if the shipper does not have a scale? Okay, that's another good question, because like I say, a good number of shippers don't have their own on-site scales. And what you do there, it really varies. Okay, what is condoned versus what is practiced, I'm going to tell you there can be a difference there. So what I will condone is, regardless of how much the load weighs, go get it scaled. Whether you use a shipper's scale or a CAT scale or whatever, it doesn't matter. Use something. Even better if it's a CAT scale though. And so, which means if the shipper doesn't have one, go hit a CAT scale on your way to your customer. And then if yours, this is where some of the differences can come into play though. Where now ideally, I will not go off my route to hit a CAT scale. But if again, how much? Okay, I'm going to have to go a little complicated here, unfortunately. So bear with me on this, okay? So we'll start with what is the build weight on the load first. Normally, if it's we'll just say above 35,000 pounds build weight, then no matter what, I'm going to scale it just in case. Even if I have reason to believe that it's probably going to be okay on the weights, I'm going to scale it no matter what. And I've made mistakes where I made an assumption based on, yeah, it's probably okay, only to find out the hard way, going and getting on a CAT scale somewhere not close to the shipper either, that I had a problem. So I'll get a little bit into the detail on that in a minute here. But generally anything below 35,000 pounds, I'm progressively less likely to scale. 30 to 35,000, I might or I might not scale it. Okay, interesting. This truck trying to squeeze in between the CAT scale here and the truck that's right in front of me, and it's kind of going over the curb there at the end of the CAT scale to do it. Weird. All right, anyway, yeah, if it's between 30 and 35,000 pounds, there's less likely I'm going to have a weight problem, but it can happen. And this is why I'm going to talk in a little bit, some anecdotes here in a minute. So depending on what the impressions I'm getting based on certain details I'll talk about in a second here. Like I say, I might scale it or I might not. As we get down below 30,000 pounds, it becomes significantly less likely that I'm going to scale it at all. Doesn't mean I won't, because like I say, there's other telltale indicators that'll will let you know if the weight on the BOL is even accurate, because sometimes they are pretty far off. Okay, so case in point on this, I had one. Now let's first talk about the suspension load gauge. My truck has the suspension load gauge, but not all of them do. So I'm going to say this part, assuming that your truck does have one. So if your truck does not have a load gauge on it, then it's you don't have this information to work with, and it becomes more difficult to figure out how well your axle weights are distributed and all that stuff. So take this part in mind with that considered, assuming you have a suspension load gauge. Okay, so my truck, if basically if I'm on flat surface and it says right at 70 psi, I know I'm probably around 34,000 pounds. Actually, I can go a little bit higher than that, I believe, because this load here that I have, I ended up scaling it. I think I was the high 32,000 range, and the limit is 34,000 for most states for tandem axles. So basically, yeah, a little bit just to hear about right around 70 psi on mine will tell me that I'm somewhere around 34,000 pounds on my drive axle. Some other trucks it'll be more like 60 psi. Or a friend of mine says that his load gauge is usually somewhere around 65 psi when he's got a 34K. So yeah, that'll even vary there. You got to know your own equipment. If you have a 30, when you do scale a load and you see that your drive axles weigh right around 34,000 or just a hair under, look at what your suspension load gauge actually says there, and that's your good telltale indicator. Okay, if I have this same PSI, then I know I have that kind of weight on the drive axles. Now, if you don't have a load gauge, a suspension load gauge, and it's more difficult to figure out if your weights are good, and it's even more advantageous for you to get on a scale no matter what, just in case, just to be sure. Now, okay, so I think that covers the gauge part. Now let's talk about the other part, the seat of the pants feel. When you're accelerating with the load, I thought this Landstar guy was going to try to do the same thing as the other guy, squeeze in between the Catskill and this guy in front of me. Yeah, no, it looked like he's getting rid of parking, right there. All right, so then the other thing which applies to everybody, compare what your build weight is to what your seat of the pants fill is, because you'll be able to tell. You can tell the difference between pulling an empty trailer versus a 20,000 pound load versus a 40,000 pound load. Yeah, the truck will accelerate very easily with an empty trailer, and then a 20,000 pound load, yeah, it'll be slower to accelerate, but it's not too bad. Like you can go up an on ramp or something, and you won't be like struggling to pick up any weight, any speed at all. It'll be slower, but it won't have like a hard time getting even up above 25 miles an hour, like on an uphill sloping on ramp or something. But now if you take a 40,000 pound load on one of those uphill sloping ramps, for example, you're gonna have a bitch of a time getting that thing up to speed. You might be lucky to even get that thing up to like 35 miles an hour, or even maybe 40 or something by the time you're at the end of the on ramp. So you will notice a definite difference in the truck's performance. And also even with the suspension, if it's a tail heavy load, you might feel more bounciness because there's not much weight on the drive axles then, and you might feel the back of your trailer bounce up and down a little bit more or something like that, or maybe the back of the trailer will feel like it keeps doing this kind of thing, like your airbags are deflated or something, which may or may not really be the case. So those are telltale signs you should be looking for as soon as you even leave the shipper. Does this feel like the weight matches what is on the bills? Now, again, don't trust what the bills say necessarily. If you can actually look inside the trailer, this is another telltale sign of what'll help you out, because some states actually do have axle length restrictions. California being chiefly the most restrictive, 40 feet kingpin to rear axle. But they're not the only state with axle length restrictions. Most of the East Coast states actually have axle length limits too. They're not quite as restrictive as California though. Usually, in most cases, it's 41 feet from the kingpin to the center of the axle group, which is actually right in between the two axles on the trailer. And on a regular tandem axle trailer, it's right about 4 feet distance between the front and rear axle. I've done this measurement. It's actually right around 46 or so inches, which is a little bit less than 4 feet. But for simplicity's sake, we'll just say they're 4 feet apart, which means your midpoint, which is where the actual limit is about halfway between the two, which is 2 feet forward of the rear axle. So if it's 41 feet from the kingpin to the center of the axle group is your limit, then the actual limit is, from the kingpin to rear axle, or a KPRA as we call it, is 43 feet, not 41. So KPRA is always 2 feet longer than the KPCG. And I do have a spreadsheet thing I'm going to talk about later when I do the recap question. I think I might have I have a table on that same sheet. I just don't know if it's visible on that one. We'll get to it later on I'd cover that. But all right, so I think that covers that. Now, okay, now getting on to the part about whether the weight on the bills is accurate or not. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. I've had one that was pretty well exaggerated. Good example here was probably the strangest load I ever did. This was a horse meat and horse serum load that I picked up in Laredo, Texas, with when I was with Sierra England. Now I was like, I thought horse meat was illegal to haul, but it turned out the reason why I was hauling it was because it was going to a laboratory that was doing scientific, like medical studies on basically tainted horse meat, and they would use the serum to basically see how it affects whatever the meat was tainted with, or something, I guess, is how it worked. That was a 3-dropper load. First one went to Tyler, Texas. The second one went to Illinois, somewhere just east of St. Louis. I just can't remember the exact city. There's a few different cities over there, so don't ask me which city it was. It was just somewhere over in the East St. Louis, Illinois, or that city that starts with an E, which I'm forgetting about. Somewhere over in that ballpark. Anyway, not important. Second drop was there, and the final drop was somewhere in Pennsylvania. Now that one, the build weight was a little over 28,000 pounds. But when I started taking off from our drop yard with it, it felt heavier than that. This doesn't feel like a 28K load. This feels like a 40K load or something. So on my way out of town, I stopped at the TA there on the north end of Laredo and went across the Catskill, and sure enough, yeah, it was very much a 40,000 pound load, because my empty weight with a sleeper cab, basically a regular, like a standard length sleeper cab with a 53-foot reefer trailer, is usually going to be around 34,500 pounds, 34,500, somewhere around that ballpark, when you're empty. So usually about 45.5-ish is about the most you can expect. And some people tend to have even a little bit heavier tractors than that. So yeah, usually if you get up above 45,000 pound build weight or actual weight, you're going to start having to worry about hitting that 80,000 pound limit, gross weight limit. So anyway, I scaled this load, and it was still heavy. But it was the first, I was in Texas, and the first stop was in Texas, and Texas doesn't have an axle length restriction, so I didn't have to worry about that. Just get my axle weights good, but I ended up having to have the tandems most of the way back. I don't remember if they were all the way back, but I know they were pretty far back, not very far away from the rear limit. So that made for a fun experience there, maneuvering on city streets in Tyler to get to the particular lab that I was going to, and then the lab itself was an interesting backing too, by the way. Anyway, that was one of those cases though where the build weight was not even close to the actual weight. See, I've had a couple other loads that were like I had picked up a load of broccoli in McAllen, Texas, that I don't remember what the build weight was, but it should have been okay on the gross, but it was barely okay. That one, I think it was like a 30-some-odd thousand pound load, like upper 30,000 pound load, but when I went and scaled it at the nearby truck stop, that was out of route about 6 miles, but I was like, I knew it was heavy. So and someone else who also drove for Sierra England at the time was, because that's who I was still with, had come back with her load. I guess her co-driver was the one driving when they left, and she never bothered to scale the load. And when the lead seat took over, I think in Corpus Christi or somewhere, they were like 700 pounds over gross. So they ended up coming back to get the load reworked. So I made it a point, like, just in case, I ended up going to the nearest scale, because I wasn't going to go like 40 miles away to the Loves up there. It was along my route, and maybe find something I didn't want to find and have to come back. So I went to the nearest cat scale instead, which was to my benefit. Now, actually, that load I was able to get worked okay, but it scaled at 79,860. That was the heaviest load I've done that wasn't actually overweight. I have had a couple loads that were overweight, overgross, and I had to get reworked. But, yeah, that one I had to do some finagling with both the tandems and the fifth wheel to get just right. Now, that one, though, that one I remember was going to, I think, Richmond, Virginia. I get Roanoke and Richmond mixed up. So the one that was over off like I-95. Not the one that's on I-81. It's the one that's over not far from where I-85 and I-95 meet up. A little bit north of that one, whatever. Maybe you guys can refresh my memory on it, or I can look on the map too. But that one. Went to a small Japanese food place or whatever it was over by the airport there. And I remembered I only had a quarter of a tank of fuel too when I scaled that one. And I was like, great, I can only put 140 pounds of fuel in before I hit the 80K limit. And at 7 pounds per gallon, that's only 20 gallons of fuel, and that's not going to get me very far. So I put her on the Qualcomm, let my DM know about it. It says, well, if you can get it legal, you're going to have to run with it like that. And if that's what, if you're going to have to make a whole bunch of extra stops for fuel, that's what's just going to have to be done. You can't get the load, you can't take the load back for rework if you can scale it legally. So I guess I was saved by the fact I only had a quarter of a tank of fuel. It didn't make for a fun experience, but c'est la vie. I ended up getting up to the Loves. I was on the way up to Corpus Christi. I don't know the name of that town. Before I got fuel every time I went across the CAD scale. What is my gross weight? And then I'd calculate how many gallons I could buy. And then when I actually go to the fuel island, don't buy any more than that amount of gallons. But that load, it turned out, what they did was they had like a whole bunch of ice all over the tops of every single one of the pallets. And then the cases that were inside the pallets also had ice all, filling them all up as well. So, and as I was driving with it, the drain holes that are in the back of the trailer, the entire time I was driving, there was water draining out those drain holes. Even though I can't see the water actually coming out, I can actually see the trail of it on the ground behind me. It was not like it was pouring out, but it was still coming out. Enough where I could see that little line there on the ground. Anyway, as I got progressively further down the road, like I ended up stopping at the Loves on Iowa, Louisiana, and scaled it again. And this time I found out I was light enough where I could buy, I think, 120 gallons of fuel, which was actually enough to almost fill me up on fuel. So, because on Freightliners I can never seem to get more than like 140, 150 gallons of fuel before I'm like really critically low on fuel, it seems. So, or a low enough point where I don't want to go any further unless I absolutely get fuel. So you got to watch for that kind of stuff too. Kind of definitely above and beyond detail here, but this might help some of you guys out someday. All right, so needless to say, don't trust the BOL weight. Use your seat of the pants feel, and also what the suspension load gauge says if you do have one. And also, if you have access to the inside of the trailer, if it's not preloaded and pre-sealed, open the back of the trailer up, or if it's not already open, and take a look at what it actually looks like in there. How close to the back of the trailer is the last pallet? How tall are the pallets? Is the last row of pallets 2 wide or 1 wide? All these little things can give you little telltale signs of how front or rear heavy the load is as well. So they'll give you like little clues, even if you don't have a suspension load gauge, that might give you an idea. Hey, be careful there. All right, so again, a lot of good detail there, but just kind of, I would say, kind of necessary evil there for a really good answer to that question. All right, so next, in case they don't have a scale and you went to a truck stop and found out you were over the limit, do you come back to the company and ask them to reduce the pallets? Okay, good question again. Now here's another, and there's also going to be an element of what I'm going to condone versus what has been done in practice by me personally. And this just because I did it in practice doesn't necessarily mean that's what I wanted to do, but it might have been in a situation where I kind of a pickle situation where, well, shit, I just made a mistake, and now what do I do? Should I just take it and take a detour route or something? And we'll get to that. So, all right. So first, if you have a scale problem, there are two aspects of this. First, are you over gross or are you just over on an axle? If you're over gross, regardless, you're definitely going to have at least one set of axles over the limit, no matter what. But I wouldn't say necessarily, because some states actually have a greater than 34,000 pound limit on tandem axles, but most of them are 34. So we'll run with that. If you're over gross, though, you're going to have to go back to the customer at the shipper and get it reworked. Just tell them you're over gross, and they'll worry about it. They'll figure out how to get it below 80,000. It's not your place to worry about that. I think you did ask also on the next question, actually. I'm going to go ahead and ask this next, at least the first part of this next question, because it's going to tie in with this. Do companies allow you to watch them while they're loading so you can see if they're loading right, and then taking in consideration to put the heavy pallet in the appropriate spot, also in balanced way, not the heavy ones, and right side and left side, which can cause a damaged suspension and a trailer rollover in curbs, ramps? How do you feel if your load is balanced or no? Okay, so part of that there. No, you don't have access to how much each individual pallet weighs. The shipper does. They know how, most of the time. Shipper doesn't necessarily even have to know how much the load weighs. I actually have gone to shippers where they give you a wheel that doesn't even have a weight on it, and you have to get on a scale to figure out about how much weight you're actually hauling. Most of the time, though, they're going to actually have a weight on there for you. But again, you don't know which pallets are which. One pallet can weigh 1,000 pounds, another pallet can weigh 3,000 pounds, or another one can weigh 4 or whatever. You have no idea. And even if you're watching them load the load, you have no way to know which pallet weighs how much. All you can really do is just go get on a cat scale or whatever, make sure that your axle weights are all good, and if they are, then just run it. If you're over gross, just take it back to the shipper. They'll either remove a full pallet, or they'll take a pallet out, take stuff off of the pallet, rewrap it, and put it back in the trailer, get as close to 80,000 as they can without going over. And they'll send you back along your way, and hopefully you'll scale okay then. But if you're under gross, like under 80,000 pounds, but over on an axle for a particular state or whatever, that maybe you can't get the tandem slid where you need them to, or maybe you slide the tandems and just can't get the weights within limit because of the physical limits of the axles, or even the fifth wheel. That's another story. Generally, they're not going to take any weight off of the trailer. What they might do is just rearrange the load, so maybe a heavier load, heavier pallet is up further away from where the problem axle is, and a lighter pallet goes toward where the problem axle is, or something along that line. But there are some catches here too. All right, so and it mainly pertains to multi-stop loads, where let's say you have like 3 or 4 receivers on that same shipment, and these are especially problematic because on those 4 drop loads, the first receiver's product should always be on the very back of the trailer, and then the second drop, their load should be right in front of the first drops, and so on. So the very last drop will be at the front of the trailer. But if you end up, if you have one of those loads and you're tail heavy though, now we have an issue of are all the heavy pallets going to the first receiver? Because if that's the case, then they don't have room to work with. But then there are other ways they might be able to manipulate it, and that is actually how they arrange the pallets individually. Like say if it was all going to the same customer, I'm not saying in a different order, but the pallets are not square shaped, they're rectangle. And this is what I mean by this. So I don't know the exact dimensions of a skid or pallet, whatever. I want to say it's somewhere around 4 feet in one direction and 3 feet or so in the other. 2.5, 3 feet, whatever, I don't know. Someone who's more expert in the warehouse industry, whatever, would know that. Can add in, and feel free to add in your expertise on that. But we'll just, for sake of explaining this, we'll just say it's 4 feet in one direction and 3 feet in the other, the dimension of a pallet. All right, so as far as arranging the pallets, they could either go 4 feet wide, 3 feet back, or 3 feet wide, 4 feet back, whatever. So it goes longer back and whatever. Or you can do what we call a pinwheel arrangement, which is where one is 4 feet, the next one in the same row is 3 feet, and then the second row will be 4 feet, 3 feet, and back and forth. It'll alternate like that. And actually, I will be covering, I think, your next question on that. So, we'll channel that one, I guess, for a second. But anyway, those can be arranged where you can kind of make more efficient use of the trailer space and make the load actually shift more forward if needed. So those multi-stop loads, maybe it's just that part where they just need to, instead of putting the load like 3 feet by 3 feet, whatever wide, and then 4 feet by 4 feet back, maybe they just pinwheel it or something. Or because I don't remember, they don't necessarily, you can't necessarily fit, depending on what kind of pallet it is, might not be able to fit double wide, like 4 feet by 4 feet, whatever. It is about 8 feet, the 8.5 feet the width of the trailer from one end to the other. Either way, though, it's the shipper's problem. You don't have to worry about that. They'll worry about that. All you have to do is worry about getting it on the scale and make sure it's legal for you to run to the customer, and that's it. As far as imbalances from left to right, don't really tend to have too much of an issue with that. If these are single wide pallet positions, they're going to put them right in the center of the trailer, and just going straight from front to back. But if they're double wide, chances are your pallets are not going to be that far off on their weights where it's going to be that big an issue. You might find out though that it is an issue, but you with certain weigh stations, if they have individual axle scales on them, because sometimes they just have a bigger plate that your entire axle goes on, and some of them will have like a split scale where only like a left axle will hit this scale, a right axle will hit a completely different scale, and every time an axle goes over, it records on the weigh station, and the weigh station can actually detect certain differences in the thresholds on the weights. So if your weights are off by a certain amount, then they'll start getting suspicious. Maybe you have an imbalanced load, or you have an airbag that is deflated or something that shouldn't be. So like if you have a deflated airbag, the axle that's on the same side as that airbag might be, it might give a lower reading on the, a lighter reading on the scale than the one that's bearing its actual weight. So But like I say, if it's an imbalanced load, which I've not really heard of that happening before, but I can't say that doesn't happen. But I've never really heard any anecdotes from other drivers about it happening, and I've never personally had it happen either. So I wouldn't really worry too much about the left-right part, but I would worry about how well they wrap the load, or if they maybe even if they have a gap between the pallets or the pallets in the wall or something. Maybe put some airbags in there so that the weight cannot shift. Because there are cases where the loads can shift and cause a trailer to overturn that should not normally overturn. Actually, one of my friends, a normal, regular watchers on this channel, Mish, part of my Scotty D clique as well, he had one of these cases where this happened to him. He's an intermodal driver in Chicago area, and he had, I know he was transitioning on from one interstate to another. I want to say I-294 was one of the interstates involved, and he was in a left transition road, and at a speed that should not have been a problem for, he's done so many loads. He has a lot of experience. He's done plenty of loads using this same interchange, and he knows what speed should have been okay to handle through there. But this one particular load, I guess the load inside the container that he was pulling, or I think it was a container, ended up shifting over the right side as he was going through the curve, and it made him so far imbalanced. But then the combination of that and the speed that he was going caused the trailer to tip over. Now, he didn't tip all the way over completely onto his right side because there was a barrier there that stopped him. I think he ended up stopping at like a 45-degree angle, but still. He ended up tipping over to some extent and had to get a wrecker to undo him, and that was because the load shifted on him, even though it was originally loaded okay. Or it could have been loaded okay. So, and what I mean by that is if they don't put enough cellophane wrap around the pallets, especially like if it's a taller load, like an 8-foot tall pallet or something, and they don't put enough cellophane on there, and the pallets and stuff, like the case of the product on the pallet actually shifts over because it's not being restrained well enough, that can actually happen. So be careful when you go through turns with loads, especially if they're tall loads. That's why it really helps to know how tall the load is inside your trailer, if whenever possible. Okay, I got a couple of other people calling me. I'm going to have to give calls back later on. Hopefully they're not calling me just to give me birthday wishes, which I don't do. All right, so I talked a little bit about the arrangement of the pallets, like the 4-3, 3-4, 4-3, kind of the alternating thing. This is actually one of the ways that if I'm actually asked how I want the load loaded in there, I would usually ask for it to be pinwheeled. I mean, that's what this alternating 4-3-3-4 arrangement is. And the reason why I do that is because it makes more efficient use of the space, so it does help the load go a little bit more forward, but not excessively forward. And because I do so many loads that involve California, so many of my loads have to adhere to that 40-foot kingpin to rear axle limit. I don't want my load being too heavy on the back, or I don't want to take a risk of it being too heavy on the back if I know I'm going to have to go through a scale in California and worry about whether I'm going to have to come back for rework. So make it easy. I just tell them to pinwheel the load, and they do it, and I don't normally ever have any problems with loads that are pinwheeled. As long as they put the first pallet close enough to the front wall of the trailer, I'm usually okay. So that is something else to consider there. Okay, so the other part of that question you asked, Mohammed, do companies allow you to watch them while they are loading you? Yes and no, again. So some shippers do not allow you onto their docks for anything, no matter what. And then produce shippers, more particularly, are prone to allow you on their dock. And particularly that is so you can pulp the load. And what I mean by pulping it is like every pallet or every row, maybe every other row of pallets that go into your trailer, Generally, you're supposed to check the temperature of the product that's in the crates or whatever as they're coming into your trailer, so you can verify that they're going in there at the right temp before you even leave with it. Because sometimes there are cases where the product is too warm or something, and by the time it gets to the receiver might reject the load because it was too warm when it was loading. So produce, particularly shippers, do tend to be more prone to allowing you to be on the dock. However, you have COVID-19 that came into play, and when everyone was going into lockdown for COVID, even produce shippers started saying, no, you can't come on our dock because we need to protect our staff from getting infected, and we want to protect you from getting infected if our staff is infected, and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of gone by the wayside for most part, but there are shippers that'll still allow you on their dock to this day. It's just not such a common thing right now with COVID going on. Receivers, though, on the other hand, they're much more likely to allow you on their dock, and the reason for that is because some drivers don't want to pay a lumper fee. So if the receiver has a third-party lumping service doing their unloading and reloading kind of stuff, they'll give the driver the option in a lot of cases. Do you want to just lump the load yourself so you don't have to pay that lumper fee, or do you want to just go ahead and wait in your truck and pay the lumper to do the work for you? I usually do that. I usually just pay the lumper. But I have actually done the lumping of my own load before, and that's I'd probably be better off leaving that as a different post, something about talk about why I don't worry about how long it takes to load or unload or something, because that's going to add a lot of extra time to this particular video, and it doesn't need to be added on. So remind me to talk about that hopefully later, and I'll talk about that. Alright, so I think, let me double check if that covers all of Mohammed's questions. Okay, yeah, actually there's a little bit more here to Mohammed's questions. Are forklift drivers trained to load very well? This is something I'm worried about before joining the trucking industry. Okay, so yeah, and he said, because I've seen YouTube videos, trailers rolling over because of unbalanced loads. And I say, that's a really good question, Mohammed, and that's a very valid concern. It's good. All right, so forklift drivers, are they trained very well? The answer is your mileage varies. Depends on who you have as a forklift operator. And then when you work, if you're dealing with shippers, now the forklift operators can come in two forms too. They have one set of workers who are called pickers, basically, and all they really do is pick and you're more likely to see them at warehouses where they actually have, like, all this really tall storage shelves and stuff, and they actually store a bunch of pallets of stuff on them. And what they'll do is they'll pull one or whatever amount of product from each location in the warehouse and start assembling a pallet that'll end up going eventually in that trailer. So they'll assemble the pallets themselves, and then they might stage the pallets or something, and then after that they'll have an actual loader. Perhaps they'll inventory everything to make sure everything is hunky-dory there. And then they'll actually put it in the trailer, and they'll also figure out how they want the pallets arranged as well, for whatever, however it needs to be done. If there's just one stop for the entire load or the multiple stops, those all play into how they sort all the pallets on there. Now, even on a single a single stop load, I can't guarantee you're going to have a good forklift operator. And because first, again, I talked earlier about how well do they wrap the load if it needs cellophane. Sometimes they wrap it like shit, and the product can go through the cellophane and shift the load on you. So I want to see good wrap on those loads. Make sure I'm not gonna, or if it's gonna be wrapped like shit, then I'm gonna be extra cautious on my curves. It's something else you can do there. Either tell them take the pallets off and rewrap them so I don't have to worry about the load shifting, or when you're actually driving, just be extra cautious with your curves. Don't go like you would be doing in a car or even with an empty trailer. That's something you can consider. Pretend like you're pulling a flatbed trailer or something and an oversized load or something. Be gentle with it. So those are your options there. And then also forklift operators do have sometimes know really well what they're doing as far as like they know exactly how to put it so you have a perfectly balanced load. Like if you put the tandems right at the 40-foot mark, so you're California legal, you can go get on a scale and you're going to find that your tandems and your drive and trailer axles are like really well balanced. Yeah, and mind you, and some of the weight can also be your fuel, but you'll find that, there are some shippers, some loaders, some forklift operators that do a damn good job with that, really know what they're doing. But then you could have someone who's inexperienced and not being well enough supervised or something, or they could load you like shit and have you tail heavy, and you end up coming back to get reworked because they did a shitty job of loading you. So, yeah, it's mileage varies, and where the last pallet is in relation to the back of the trailer is going to tell you a lot. So if it's close to the back of the trailer, where I can't even get inside the trailer to put my load locks in, I'm going to be even extra more concerned if I'm going to be involving any states that have axle length limits. So there's that. I do tend to talk about these also in my videos when I'm doing pickups. I do tend to mention that when I do have access to the inside of the trailer after loading, how far away the back of the last pallet is from the back of from the doors, how high they're stacked. Is it one pallet or two pallets in the back row, and this kind of stuff? Those all can make differences, and those are little telltale things you can also learn from if you're watching my, particularly any of my pickup videos. Sometimes I'll have access to the inside of the trailer, sometimes I won't. JCT trailers almost always have inspection/vent doors on the right side trailer door as well. So if the shipper did not pre-seal that door, I can even if I can't see if I can't open the inside of the open the doors, I can sometimes open the inspection door so I can look inside to get kind of an idea of what's going on back there. Which can also be really helpful if I acquire a load by repower. I say another driver picked it up and they dropped it in a drop yard and I acquired it from the drop yard, or if I swapped with them directly, I can use that inspection door to see what kind of condition that load is in before I leave with it. But there are other loads where the shipper will actually seal both the right trailer door and the inspection door, so there's no way possible for me to know how the load looks in there. In that case, it's just then it becomes experience. If it's a meat load, which usually is the case, they don't tend to be that stacked that high. They tend to be like 4 or 5 foot high stacks, not super high up, and not super concerning to me anyway. But if it's a produce load, and those are 8 foot tall loads, then I'm going to be a lot more concerned about those. But or if it's and there are some that are packaged goods that are also like 8 foot high loads as well. So I'll be a lot more concerned about those taller loads. All right, so I think that might cover all of Muhammad's questions. Okay. So Muhammad, thank you for taking the time to ask those questions. Like I say, they're all good questions that are going to help some other people who watch this channel. And I'm going to get to, there's a comment on one of my videos not too long ago. Let me go find it. And I will address that one. I want to make sure I give credit to the right person for asking it. Okay, so This next one is from Radical Renegade. This was asked in my December 7 delivery to Pacific Transload Systems in Oakland video. That was one I just did last week, within the last week, whatever. Okay, so Radical Renegade, actually two comments in there from Radical Renegade, kind of both cover the same thing. I'll go ahead and read them both for you guys. First one was, hey Scott, I actually had time to see the whole video. I missed half the Arkansas City pickup. What's a recap? And okay, so the second question is pretty much the same thing. So that's what I'm going to cover on this. I'm glad my Qualcomm started back up because I kind of need that Qualcomm to answer this question.
Was your first sponsor.
I do have screenshots I'm going to include in here, so to help further explain this. All right, so a recap is basically now in any 8-day period, I can only have 70 hours of on-duty time before I can no longer drive. I can be on duty for more than 70 hours in any given period. Like I can work 15-hour days, 7 days a week, but if I do that, I can't drive the truck because I'm going to have an expired 70-hour clock. And the point of me being in the truck is to drive the truck, not to do other stuff that prevents me from moving the truck. So generally, the idea is don't use on-duty time if I don't need to use on-duty time, because I get paid by the mile, and I want my on-duty time to actually be productive and making me more money. So anyway, any given 8-day rolling period, let's just say Sunday through the next Monday. Like today is what, Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday, December 14th. I'm gonna show you my my 8-day page here. You're gonna see that it covers the dates December 7th through December 14th. I've already finished today's shift because I ran out of hours on my 70-hour clock, and I'm in a recap situation. So just so happens to be this is it's a good situation for me to explain this and answer this question in good detail for you. Okay, so when midnight tonight comes around, and it rolls into the 15th, what's going to happen is December 7 is going to roll off of that 8-day period, and as you see here on my 8-day page, on the very far right column, it says on duty. Going from the bottom to the top, I have 7 hours and 10 minutes, 7 hours 15 minutes, 11:39, and so on. Okay, so when we roll into midnight tonight Central Time, and it's Central Time for me because that's where JCT's home terminal is in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, which is in Central Time Zone. Wherever your company's home terminal is generally what time zone you work with on your recaps. So for me, it's Central Time. As soon as midnight comes around, what will happen is I get those 7 hours and 10 minutes back on my 70-hour clock to get added back to it. Now, what do I have on there right now? I'm going to go to the summary page, and you'll see that I only have 35 minutes left on my clock, which is why I stopped here instead of running my previous shift and the current shift the way I actually did run them. So basically, I can only drive another half hour before I can no longer drive at all. And so what I'm going to end up doing is do a full 10-hour break here. And then what I can do is roll into my tonight recaps. So I can start my shift about half an hour before midnight tonight, Central Time. And that'll allow me to roll straight into those 7 hour and 10 minute recaps that I get back later tonight. And allow me to, but I'm 250 miles away from my customer right now, so it's going to take just a little bit more than 4 hours from start to finish, and that will include the on-duty for pre-trip time as well to get over there. So that's basically what a recap is, but I mean a little bit more detail on this for you. You may or may not get the recaps back that are on that particular day. So I'm going to take you to the status page here, and up on the top right side of the main panel there, you're going to see last 34-hour reset. On mine right now, it says no reset in current cycle. So that means I haven't done any 34-hour resets in the last 8 days. And because of that, that means that whatever shows up on my 8-day page at the very bottom, that's what I get back that same night. So at the bottom since I haven't done a reset, tonight I get 7:10 back on my 70-hour clock, and then tomorrow I get 7:15 back. And I can only drive for as long as I have a positive number on all of my clocks. I'm not going to go into whole detail on what each clock means right now because I just want to cover the recap part. I'm going to have to add more time to this video if I go into detail on what the clocks all mean. So we'll cover that later on if you guys have questions on that one later on. Now, but going back to the status page, let's say I've done a 34-hour reset and that it was maybe 5 days ago. Maybe it says my last reset was on December 9th or something. So what would happen would be my 70-hour clock, whatever's on it at the time, is all I have to work with until I get to whatever that day is that when it shows up on my 8-day page. So if my last reset was on December 9, and if I go into my 8-day page, then December 7 and 8, it doesn't matter if there are any hours on there or not. That means I would not get those hours back. It would just be 0 and 0 on the 7th and for the what comes back tonight and tomorrow night if my last reset was on the 9th. So even though it says 7:10 and 7:15, had I done my reset on the 9th, then I would not get anything back those 2 nights. And then the next night, the night of the 9th, where I get the 11:39 back, is where my first recaps would come in. So I would have 2 nights of no recaps, and then the third night would be 11:39. So whatever's on my 70-hour clock, but until then, is all I have to work with. So hopefully that'll adequately answer that question for you. Again, good question. I'd have to go into weed patch with the different clocks and management of them in other ways as well. So, like I say, I'll address those on a different future video if you guys have questions on that as well. So, that wraps up this. Again, thanks you guys. Thank both of you guys, Mohammed Sadiq and Radical Renegade, for asking these questions. We'll do some more of these if whenever you guys have questions you want to answer. Just you can either ask them directly in the comments section, or if you want, like what Mohammed did, you can always also just email me at zaniac1263@gmail.com, or 1273. Sorry, Zaniac1273, ZANIAC1273@gmail.com. Or you can even find me on Facebook and just message me on there or something, and I can catalog it there or something, whatever the case might be. I can either answer you directly on there, or if you want to see another one of these Q&A type videos, I'll do that way as well. All right, so again, thanks you guys for the questions, and whoever's still watching, thanks you guys for having the attention span and the interest to actually watch all of this. All right, so to see who's actually paying attention, how many fingers am I holding up? All right, you guys all have a great day, and yeah, I'll probably talk some more in detail on the 34-hour reset stuff in conjunction with my delivery tomorrow at Walmart in Terrell, because I may or may not have that situation because I don't have a pre-plan yet, and we'll talk more about that when the time comes right. So thanks again. We'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow, if all goes as planned. Whatever day this one posts, the next one after that hopefully will be if not 2 days later, you'll see the Walmart delivery. Okay, all right, we'll see you guys then. Have a great day.